So you've probably heard by now Juan Thornhill is being released by the Browns after 2 seasons on his 3-year, $21 million contract. He was brought in after winning 2 Super Bowls with Kansas City as a hopeful, stalwart piece in the back end of this Browns defense to help take them to the next level. And it wasn't even close to that. It was 2 extremely mediocre years. He missed 11 games. He had a constant nagging calf injury. And then when he was on the field last year, it was on a really bad team. But how does a Super Bowl champion fall off so far? Well, the thing is that the idea of a Super Bowl champion player or a championship DNA type guy is something that completely blinds front offices in every sport, on every team throughout all of history. There's countless guys in baseball, in basketball, who were supposed to be enormous free agent signings, and some guys are still being paid to this day because they had to cut them after these legendarily huge sums of money were given out to them. And with the Browns, they've done this 2 times in 10 years now. And no, we're not talking about Deshaun Watson. He was never in a Super Bowl. We're not referring to that. We're talking about eerily similar examples of guys coming from Super Bowl teams who came to the Browns and ultimately their careers ended in them being released and not living up to the contracts. I'm talking about Juan Thornhill and Paul Kruger back in 2013. If you're too young, Paul Kruger was an integral part of the Ravens Super Bowl championship in 2012. He went out, he had like 10 sacks, he had an amazing postseason. He becomes a free agent, and then the Browns signed him to a 5-year, $40 million deal. The situations were a little bit different because the Browns were really struggling back then. Like, they had no success. The Browns have had some success over the past 4 years. So with Juan Thornhill, it was like, hey, this guy, we have good defensive players. He'll be another piece from a championship level team who can help us be more like a championship level team. He's going to bring a culture to him, a leadership, something like that. With the Paul Kruger example, it was like, he's going to be our number 1 pass rusher. He's coming from a championship team. This is a really bad team. There are some good pieces here and there, but he's going to be our mainstay. So it's not exactly similar in terms of the context, but in terms of the methodology, I think it is right on the nose. And this is such a flawed approach because football is such an interdependent game. It's not like baseball where you have a WAR rating. And if you're not familiar with that, like, WAR means wins above replacement. Hopefully I explained this right. But in baseball, you get a number like Shohei Ohtani. His WAR rating is 7.9. So that means that by having him play, he is responsible for adding 7 wins to the Dodgers, 7.9 wins, almost 8 wins to the Dodgers by having him play versus putting a replacement player in for him as a DH. And like I said, football is just not like that. When it comes to defensive backs and defensive ends, D linemen, it's so interconnected. If you have a good season as a kind of middle, not household name safety like Juan Thornhill was in Kansas City, it's probably because you're surrounded by other great talent. That doesn't mean you're not a good player or even above average, but it means that your success was somewhat dependent on the performances around you and the system around you. The same way it was with Paul Kruger. He was never a Myles Garrett. He was never a Bosa brother. He was never even a top name in the pass rushing world. He had a really good season because he was playing with Hall of Fame talent around him. And I think that the same could be said about Juan Thornhill. With Paul Kruger, he had that great season, but he's playing with Haloti Ngata. He's playing with Donnell Ellerbe, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, like, loaded with guys who will be in the Hall of Fame or in the conversation, guys who were way above average players. With Juan Thornhill, yes, they win the 2 Super Bowls with him while he's there, but he's playing with guys like George Karlaftis, Chris Jones, Frank Clark. He's playing with L'Jarius Sneed. He's playing with Trent McDuffie. He's playing with Justin Reed. That ultimately amounted into him having a 71.8 PFF grade. He was 26th out of 89 probable safeties for his position in that ranking order. Team like the Browns or any team in general, they look at that and they go like, oh man, he's a really good player. Like, he was responsible for helping them win, which he absolutely was, but he was not integral to the point where he pushed them over the edge. He was playing within a great system. Steve Spagnuolo, all those defensive players we listed, And that is what made him as good as he was. So this shouldn't be looked at in the sense of like, oh, what a terrible signing. Like Juan Thornhill was an above average player and he was signed to an average contract. 3 years, $21 million. It was nowhere near what top safeties were making. So it's not that crazy of a swing and miss. Like $7 million left on his contract. It's not dire by any means, but it's wasted in the sense that you had guys like Ronnie Hickman and DeAnthony Bell sitting on the bench behind him when he was available to play. Like when Juan Thornhill was healthy, he was the starter, even though guys like Ronnie Hickman and DeAnthony Bell really did perform better and they were younger and they could have used the reps to continue to improve even more. In football, being a champion holds so much weight because it's so difficult. But like we said, it's not baseball where you can just transplant one guy and you're going to get that continued performance. There's only a few guys who have that kind of pedigree, one of them being Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa. There's very few people outside of the quarterback space who are going to be able to step in and immediately elevate a team. The biggest marker within all of this, though, of what you should avoid are guys who teams don't try to re-sign when they become free agents after they win the Super Bowl. If they were viewed as integral to that team's success and their championship run, they would be re-signed. And that is why good teams like the Patriots, the Chiefs, now the Eagles kind of starting their own little dynasty potentially over the next few years, they will retain the key people and they will let the rotational guys who they can just replace and get a similar level of performance walk out of the door and get paid these huge sums of money or moderately big sums of money from teams who are just looking to add some of that championship DNA. That is the biggest thing. Like Paul Kruger was available to sign as a free agent. He was going to get a ton of money, and the Ravens weren't willing to pay for that because they knew a lot of this success is because you have Terrell Suggs, you have Haloti Ngata, you have Ray Lewis, you have Ed Reed on this defense. With the Chiefs, you have L'Jarius Sneed, you have Trent McDuffie, you have Justin Reed, you have Chris Jones, George Karlaftis. You had so many people who are the actual core pieces of that defense. And those are the guys you keep around, and those are the guys who are going to keep you relevant, and that's why they've stayed relevant. There was no fall off after Juan Thornhill left and went to the Browns. With the Ravens, it was a bit different because you had a bunch of guys, you had to pay Joe Flacco a huge contract, Ray Lewis retires, tons of moving pieces within that. So that is something that people in front offices in general in every sport need to be wary of. Don't pick the guys up and give them above average money or even average money when you have people on your roster already who are going to give you the same level of performance just because they played for a championship team. And I think Cleveland has learned from that. I think that it's honestly good that they're releasing him because you're better off developing the people who you already have in your roster and drafting a guy who can step in and play that if you don't believe in Hickman or Bell. And it's super, super easy to want to bang on Andrew Berry because of this in the Browns front office. But again, like we said, this happens all the time in every single sport. This is more of a PSA in general of just like in football, you can't point directly to one person and be like, because they won a championship, they're going to bring that culture over here. It's not how it works. I don't think it's ever worked that way. And also going back, it's like if you were actually trying to have a core piece in that back end as a free safety to be running with Grant Delpit and the rest of that defense, you had guys like Jesse Bates, Jordan Poyer, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Taylor Rapp, who were available that season as free agents. And it's like, yeah, they would have required a lot more money. I think Jesse Bates signed a $64 million contract for 4 years. That's what it costs to have an elite level player. And I mean, look at that example with the Cincinnati Bengals. Jesse Bates, Von Bell, that duo of safeties in their back end is really what helped their defense go to the Super Bowl. Stop Mahomes in the AFC Championship. Be very close to beating the Rams in the Super Bowl. Yeah, Joe Burrow was amazing, but like their defense performed way above their level of talent. And I think it was a lot because of those guys anchoring in the back end. And the fact that the Bengals didn't re-sign Jesse Bates, like that is insane to me. That would have been a great opportunity for the Browns to step in and yes, swing big. Maybe it's just because too much money is tied up, but if you're trying to do something big and build a championship level team, you can't have these value picks. Your value picks come through smaller free agent signings and drafting and developing well. When you need to swing big, you got to go for the Big Mac, not the McDouble, right? So I think that approach going forward, best player available, and if you're attacking free agency, get real highly sought after free agents, not guys who should work on paper because they came from successful programs, because it's the program, not the player. And if you're letting guys walk, it is clear that they are not integral to the program. So just thought we'd jump in on that. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, if, you know, one of the safeties already on the roster gets promoted, or if they potentially try to get a guy like Xavier Watts in the draft this year. A lot of moving parts. Appreciate you guys tuning into the Optimistic Fan Club. Make sure you check out Patreon. We got a bunch of prospect videos, putting stuff out more every single week. We're going to have some mock drafts. We're trying to follow along with the Myles Garrett stuff. If another trade offer comes up, that's really going to be able to help us shape what mock drafts look like, but it's still very under wraps right now. But scouting combine coming up, lots of things. So we're going to be ramping up over there. Make sure you join, check us out, support the channel. Appreciate you guys. Let me know what you think of Juan Thornhill. Send him some goodbye thoughts in the comments, and we will see you in the next one.